Welcome to yet another exciting edition of your favorite Sunday morning program, Media Monitor, live here on the SABC News channel, where we give you a weekly dose of vigorous analysis of some of the biggest news of this week. I'm your host, Alicia Jali. Thank you so much for joining us. Here's what we will be unpacking for you in the next hour. The economic freedom fighters celebrated their 4th anniversary this past Wednesday. We look into how the celebrations unfolded out in Durban yesterday. We'll also take a look into the life and times of veteran government spokesperson Ronema Moepa, who died last week Saturday, age 56, and was buried yesterday. And the education department continues to be faced with various challenges, primarily racial tensions within schools. And finally, Dr. Makhosi Khoza was officially charged this past week by the NC's KwaZulu-Natal branch for what they term extreme ill discipline. That and more right here on Media Monitor. But first, as always, it's 900 hours. Time to take a look at the news-making headlines. The Johannesburg Metro has confirmed that a high-level probe is underway into the cause of a stampede in which 2 people were killed and several others injured at the FNB Stadium in the city. Johannesburg Metro member of the mayoral committee, Michael Sun, says fake tickets, which were reportedly being sold at an entrance to the 90,000-seater stadium, caused a riot which led to that stampede. Tickets for the Soweto derby between Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates were sold out 2 weeks ago, and the organizers had warned those without tickets not to even go to the stadium. The match, however, continued and Chiefs won 1-0. In 2001, you'd remember that 63 people died in a stampede at a soccer derby out at the Ellis Parker Stadium here in Johannesburg. EFF leader Julius Malema has threatened to go back to the Constitutional Court should the Speaker of the National Assembly, Baleka Mbete, refuse to allow for a secret ballot during the August 8th vote of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma. The Constitutional Court earlier ruled that Mbete had the powers to order for a secret ballot, but left her the choice to do so. Malema told supporters at the party's 4th anniversary celebrations in Durban that the ANC didn't trust its MPs. And some great news in the sporting front, and the Lions will have home advantage as they chase their first Super Rugby crown against the Canterbury Crusaders in Johannesburg next Saturday. The Lions stormed back from a 22-3 down late in the first half to claim a 44-29 victory over the defending champions, the Hurricanes, in yesterday's semi-final.
And in the line from Forster is brilliant, spotted by Jaco Paper.
All right, let's welcome our panelists today. First up, we have SABC Digital News producer, Mr. Tsepi Somoshe. Tsepi, so good morning to you.
Morning, Alicia.
Morning. All right, before we get down to the digital news, we do have political analyst on the main set, Ms. Lebohang Pheko, as well as media analyst, Mr. Melo Makgoleho. Ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure to have you both. Good morning.
Good morning, Alicia.
All right, Tsepi, so take it away. What was the biggest hashtag of this week?
The biggest hashtag for this week, Alicia, was the Mandela book. Now, Alicia, this comes after a publishing company, Penguin, pulled off a book detailing the last years of former President Nelson Mandela, and that generated a lot of commentary. And the book, we must remember that it was pulled off after former statesman widow Graça Machel complained together with Mandla Mandela, the eldest grandson of the former statesman, complained that the book violated the patient-doctor confidentiality, and that on its own generated a lot of commentary. And as you can see here, we have so many tweets from people reacting to the news that the book has been pulled off.
Let's look at those tweets. Tsepi Sombongeni there says, I have a feeling that Mam Winnie Mandela was or is behind the authorization of the publishing of the book Mandela's Last Years. What does Vuyani Green say there?
Vuyani Green says the withdrawal of the Mandela book amounts to self-censorship. The aggrieved party should have interdicted the publishers beforehand. Hashtag Mandela.
And there's another one from Maroti Silailo says, Matigizela Mandela sent VJ Ramla Khan a note congratulating him on the book. So there's another suspicion that, Mamwin is behind it. What is Katleho saying there?
Katleho says, for the benefit of the curious, Dr. VJ Ramla Khan's book, The Mandelas Last Year, will now obviously be printed by Backyard Publishers.
Lebohang, what did you make of these developments this whole week?
It's just a reflection on the contradictions of Ndate Mandela's final years, where he was seen as public property, the contestations and the conflicts between his public persona and his private persona, the many factions within his family as well. There's the Madikizela Mandela faction, there's the Grasa Machel faction, there is the Mandla Mandela faction. There are different factions even between, even within the clan, and I'm not sure whether banning this book is very helpful. And I think in general it has given it more petrol, more fuel, and it has made us much more curious. But also I think it's fair to understand that he was a public figure.
Absolutely.
That different people will have different perspectives of him. And also I think that the publishers surely would have taken this through their legal checks beforehand. So I think it's slightly disingenuous and cowardly of them to now distance themselves and to burn the book. And the whole idea of book burning and book banning in 2017 in South Africa is slightly distasteful.
All right, Tsepi, so let's move on to the next big hashtag of this week. What was happening at the EFF's birthday?
Now, Alicia, EFF was celebrating its 40th anniversary in KZN yesterday.
A sea of red.
Yes, and that also generated a lot of commentary, with many people saying they are happy that EFF, up to so far, it hasn't not been divided. They are united, and it is an alternative. And here, as you can see, Ace saying, watching the EFF birthday in KZN, I'm not impressed with the numbers, but slowly but surely we are getting there.
Menelis Ndwandwe says that at EFF South Africa after party was epic. Wow, we haven't seen pictures from that yet.
And this one is from Elton saying, happy birthday to you and the EFF.
William says they are trying to distort our message, but we surge ahead. Tell no lies, claim no easy victory. Melo, what did you make of the celebrations out in Durban?
Well, I think the EFF is doing very well for themselves. I mean, like, the one thing that the EFF has tried to avoid is become a regional and localized party like the likes of the UDMs and so on. I think the other thing that they've also strived to move away from is the trap that COPE fell into, where COPE didn't actually build structures on the ground, and that enabled them to flourish. So I think Julius has taken that to heart. And also, I think it was a very smart move during the week. You'd have seen that he met up with the Zulu King. We're
going to talk about that later on in the show. So let's quickly go through the last digital story of this week before I let you go. What was happening at the FNB? My goodness.
Alicia, we're ending it on the sad note. Yesterday, the much anticipated Soweto Derby ended in a negative way after two people lost their lives. And this, some are saying it's because of the fake ticket that were sold before the match. Others are saying it's because some gates were not open. And as you can see, the visuals here are very disturbing.
Any tweets on this matter? Success, they're saying, why was there a stampede at FNB Stadium to begin with? Yes, I mean, surely not enough gates were opened at a sold-out event. May their souls rest in peace. Thank you so much, Success, for those contributions. Let's take the next one, Tsepi. So
the next one is from Bruno saying, very sad day for football as a stampede outside FNB Soccer City Stadium in Soweto leaves 2 people dead and several injured.
All right, last but not least, Duchess says, last time I went to the derby at FNB 3 years ago, I had a gun pointed at my face and decided to never ever go again. Very interesting that these kind of things are happening where there's supposed to be a high level of security. Give our viewers that URL where they can get all these stories and more episodes.
Alicia, viewers at home can catch this show and other shows on our YouTube channel by simply searching SABC Digital News. Alternatively, they can visit our news website www.sabc.co.za/news.
There it is. All right, after the break, we take a look at the birthday celebrations of the EFF that were held in Durban yesterday. That and more coming up here on Media Monitor. Do stay with us.
talk about succession debates in the ANC.
Alliance, after the break, we pay tribute to the late Ronnie Mamweba. Please stay tuned to Video Monitor. Welcome back. Hundreds of mourners came to pay their final respects to veteran government communicator and late anti-apartheid activist Ronnie Mamweba. President Jacob Zuma declared a special provincial official funeral for Mamweba, who died in Pretoria last Saturday after suffering from a stroke last month. Mamweba was hailed as a highly regarded government communicator, accomplished public servant and freedom fighter. He had worked as spokesman and head of communications for the first post-apartheid Gauteng Premier Tokyo Sexwale between 1994 and 1996. He later served as a chief director of communications and the spokesperson for former President Thabo Mbeki and Zuma, who was still deputy president at the time before becoming a foreign ministry spokesman. And in 2014, Mamweba was seconded to the presidency by the Department of Home Affairs and of course became the spokesperson for Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, a position he held until his untimely death. South African National Editors Forum Media Freedom Subcommittee Chairperson Sam Mkokeli described Mamweba as a very special gentleman who never allowed his frustrations with the media when we got things wrong, as we sometimes do, to get in the way of the message. Mkokeli also added, we all in the media have had the opportunity to drink from his well of wisdom. Communications Minister Ayanda Dlodlo announced early this week that the Government Communication and Information Systems, or GCIS, in Pretoria Media Centre has been named after Mr. Ronnie Mamweba. All right, well, on the line, we're very pleased to be joined by Deputy Chair of the SABC Interim Board, veteran journalist Ubabu Matata Tsedu, who is going to share with us his experiences in working with Ubabu Ronnie Mamweba. A very good morning to you, Papa Tsedu. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, morning, Alicia.
Look, many over the past week describe Ronnie Mamweba as one with a big heart. Any personal fond memories you have of Ronnie?
Yeah, well, I started knowing Ronnie, I first met him around the 90s. He was a young man working for the ANC's DIP department, which is the Information and Publicity. And it was a department that was, at that time, populated by highly capable people like Pano Jordan, Joel Stenge, Jill Marcus, Carl Niehaus, Saki Matozoma. So, for me, the importance that was attached to Ronnie's own role in that department became quite clear when, in '94, when the went to cast his vote in KZN. Of all that cream of communicating, it was Ronnie who was dispatched with the then leader of the ANC to go and oversee the communication work around his voting. That showed, for me, the importance attached to his own abilities to do his work. But when you interacted with Ronnie, you found a jovial person, very loud, and very insistent on understanding what it is that you're trying to do around the principal that he would be looking after at that time. So if you asked Ronnie for an interview with one of his principals, he would really grill you before agreeing to the interview, because he would always try and make sure that whatever it is that you want, he understands it. But he would also be having things that he wants out of that interview. And he would even say to you that when you sit with this person, then also ask him about this and that and that.
Papa Tsedu, look, let me put you on the spot here. We know that Mamwepa was a veteran journalist who worked under harsh apartheid laws. What would you say sets the likes of you and those of Mamwepa apart from government communicators and journalists of today? And what can we specifically learn from the old schools?
Insofar as Ron was concerned, I think the biggest lesson is that you need to know your story. So whether he was working in the Department of Home Affairs or at Foreign Affairs or as the spokesperson for the Premier in Gauteng, Ronnie understood the issues that confronted that space. And he would make sure that in whatever answers and arrangements that he makes for the media, they also understand the issues that are in that department. He was very, very clear about that. One of the things that I think people might not even remember is that when Tokyo was premier, there was no convoy with blue light and all of that. Tokyo drove around in 2 Golfs. And there was this one day when Tokyo had been to address some big business people dressed in a suit. And from there, they were going to go to an informal settlement to talk to people there. And along the way, on the highway, those cars stopped and Tokyo changed from the suit to the tracksuit. And my understanding is that the night before, Tokyo, Ronnie had said to Tokyo, Chief, you can't go to the informal settlement in that suit, so you must bring some other clothes. So Tokyo had this tracksuit in the car already. But the idea, the point really is that Ronnie knew that if Tokyo was to arrive there in some swanky Armani suit, it would detract from the message that he was bringing to people who were very down in terms of their own resources. So the imaging of the message was critical insofar as Ronnie was concerned.
All right, Papa Tsedu, thank you so much for joining us on the line. That is veteran journalist as well as SABC interim board deputy chairperson Matata Tsedu joining us on the line to share some of the fondest memories that he had. I just want to ask you over here, I mean, we do know that the GCIS Centre is going to be named after him. Lebohang, what can you tell us about this late communicator, and particularly what can we learn as the media industry from his ethics? I mean, he was praised as an individual who wouldn't be swayed easily when it came to principles.
So I think one of the things about Ronnie, Ronnie, was that he was unobtrusive in his style of communication, and there wasn't the sort of abrasive, sometimes shrill tone that has sometimes emerged from other government spin doctors in recent years. And I think that the other thing that's quite important is that he didn't seem to see himself as the gatekeeper of the party political line, which is quite important. You just, government communication is really a facilitator between the state and the media and the public, rather than a gatekeeper. And I think, you know, there's an impression that's been created that, you know, some government spokespeople see themselves as bodyguards, you know, Dimanjinkilani for ideology, which is very unfortunate and quite unpalatable. And it sends out a particular hostile and combative message. And that certainly, he had a particular way about him, and a particular way about him, I think, in terms of respecting the office as well as respecting the public. And I think that's something that others could perhaps also take some, you know, a cue from of the current generation. And I think people in communication in general, understanding that there's a line between cadreship and the function, a state function, which is supposed to communicate and to give a sense of, also build a sense of confidence.
Absolutely.
Between the state and the population at large.
Sometimes that line is very blurred. Hey, Melo?
No, absolutely, I agree. I think one of the important things is that government, in as much as it's a vehicle to advance a political agenda, which we are mandated by through the elections, I think it's also an institution to serve the people. And when you're communicating, sometimes the media, much as they may be hostile to your agenda or whatever, there seems to be a certain level of professionalism in the way you engage with the media and not degenerate into personal spats with people. And I think that's part of the thing that's missing. So you've got to sort of like remove yourself, disassociate yourself somehow from the situation and not become emotionally entangled in the situation. And I think for me, that is something that in the current dispensation, I mean, like, obviously, things like social media have made it a little bit more difficult to be able to maintain that sense of disassociation. But it's something that I think is helpful, because what it does then, it enables people to engage in a professional manner regardless of their political orientation.
But with that said, Melo, how do we then emulate those principles and ethics of the likes of Roni with all that's going on in the current days, Lebohang?
Shouldn't there be training? I think the one thing is, shouldn't there be training? Shouldn't we stop assuming that because you carry a particular party political card that you are skilled and efficient, you know, and versed in this particular skill set? The other thing is, do you have to carry a particular party political card as well? Can't we just, you know, open this to as a competitive process to people at large who may have the necessary skill set to communicate a mandate in a particular way? And I think a good example is that in lots of countries, you know, the UK, you know, etc., your government spokespeople and the people who are aligned to the presidency or to any particular ministerial position are not necessarily card-carrying members, but they are loyal, they'll do their job effectively, they'll communicate effectively. So I think that we need to kind of begin to be a bit more rational about our, and I mean 23 years, I think we can afford to begin to be a bit more rational about the way we even make choices.
What do you think, Melo? Look, Macron wasn't even a politician when he assumed the presidency in France.
But then there's always the situation of Trump, right, and his communicators.
Trump has his own communicator at the moment.
On Twitter. Let's leave it there on that topic. And after the break, we look into the education department issues. It's all coming up right here on Media Monitor. You don't want to miss it. Up at various schools around Gauteng. Klipspruit Secondary School in Soweto was closed on Monday morning after residents there stopped staff and pupils from entering, arguing that the process used to appoint the new principal was flawed, as the principal is black in a predominantly coloured community. Now, after visiting the school, Gauteng Education MEC Panyaza Lesufi resolved to dissolve the school's governing body, and more racial incidents occurred at Windsor House Academy out in Kempton Park, where it is alleged that black pupils were targeted over their natural hair, which in some cases was allegedly referred to as being unruly. Now, the school has since agreed to suspend its code of conduct for 3 months pending a review. Meanwhile, a teacher at the St. John's College in Johannesburg has ultimately resigned after being found guilty of serious misconduct for making racist comments. An outrage erupted after the teacher was allowed to continue teaching at the school despite being found guilty by even an independent tribunal for victimizing pupils based on their race. Provincial Education MEC Panyaza Lesufi visited that school on Friday morning. Let's find out more in this clip.
Windsor House Academy, meant to be a place of learning and teaching, but education compromised by repeated acts of discrimination.
The principal called us saying that everyone that has braids should go downstairs. Then when we got downstairs, we waited for her in the hall. Then she came, then she just took her out of the school. She said we must leave. She doesn't want our braids. Even though they were tied properly, they were neat.
We took off our braids, but...
Do you see it as racism?
It's racial segregation within the school. It's systematic racism.
Leaving parents fuming.
It's not the first time this has happened. Hair has always been an issue. But I didn't think she would take it to the extent where she would kick girls out. And I was told by my niece that it was about 20 girls. And these are kids that have had braids before, that have had this kind of hair. And it was just... It's frustrating.
The Gauteng Education MEC forced to intervene and hear for himself.
One of the girls had an afro last time and she was told it's unruly.
The school principal at pains to explain.
Each and every day we learn from each other. What you've said, I'm not going to argue that.
But the MEC stood firm.
And I've said this to the principal and I want to say it to you now. From now on, there is no single learner that is going to be expelled from this school related to hers, henceforth.
5 students will now be nominated to submit proposals and amendments to the school policy, now on ice for the next 3 months. Lesufi says he will return in 3 months to assess progress on the revised Code of Conduct. Griselda Lewis, SABC News in Kempton Park.
I think there's nothing more degrading than being told that your natural hair is inappropriate. Lebohang, let's start with you.
The thing is, these are the banal symptoms of institutional racism, and I think we're having the wrong conversation. I think this is to do with, the whole notion of how we haven't decolonized and deconstructed our education system and our imagination. So, I mean, you will find things in a school policy that say girls' hair mustn't touch their ears. Now, my hair and your hair cannot touch our ears. And I've been looking, I mean, both of my daughters, I always, every year, I'm like, but why are we reading this nonsense? Boys' hair mustn't reach their eyes. Yeah. Your hair cannot reach your eyes, but unless you do some serious Revlon, some what. It can't. So it shows that the imagination is a white imagination. And we need to have that conversation. We also need to have a conversation about the other violences of the curriculum, the violence that Afrikaans continues to be the default second language medium of instruction. Those are very important conversations. By the time we're coming to the hair stuff, it illustrates that we've already missed it. Those are now the banal symptoms of much deeper issues. And not that hair is not important, it is, but it illustrates that we have not reconstructed and deconstructed our governing boards, the leadership in teaching, the policy making in teaching. The HRC some years ago, they put out a very important report that illustrated that 62% of children in this country still felt that they were experiencing forms of racism. At your so-called good schools, your private schools and your Model C schools. That's a damning indictment. So Bo Windsor High, Bo Pretoria Girls, Lawson Girls, Benoni High, which is a bit close to home for me. These are things that have been happening, and we have to stop getting wound up by symptoms and go and really have a much deeper conversation about how we revolutionize and we galvanize this education system so that it is not only welcoming, but it shows that this is an African country where the African child is welcomed, where the African child is nurtured and valued.
So then what would be the department's role in ensuring that all these schools actually adhere to those regulations? Because I did speak to the department and they're saying that their issue is making sure that education comes first and foremost, and all those other issues infringe in there. They do give the trust to SGBs, but it seems like the SGBs are not doing their job. How do we then differentiate between the private schools' rules and the public schools' rules?
I think for me, the one thing that happened with education when we came out of sort of like the apartheid regime in 1994, you had this talk of Model A, Model B and Model C schools. Then what that thing did is that there was a sort of a semi-privatization of schools in terms of devolving authority and regulatory capability down to school governing bodies.
Absolutely.
And then part of the reason, obviously, it was that a lot of the Afrikaans hoër schools were afraid that the government will start imposing on them and policies and so on. So they devolved the authority down to the governing bodies. And then ever since, we've never really had a conversation about how we correct that type of thing.
That's very true.
I think for me, like the one conversation to pick up on something that Lebohang said, that conversation we haven't had is that often we hear that people say, can liberation movements govern, right? And then part of that conversation is rooted in the notion that can somebody move from fighting an oppressive system to go into creating sort of a democratic egalitarian system. On the opposite end of the thing, we haven't really talked about can institutions that perpetuated colonial norms, apartheid norms, really function and survive within a democratic dispensation that is sort of like pluralist as we are. We've never really had that conversation. It's almost like we're almost policing the black side of things and saying the black people must make sure that they meet up to the standard.
Yeah.
But on the other end, these institutions continue. And I think...
I mean, we heard the lady there, is it the principal? She says they're still learning every day.
After 23 years.
Learning what?
I mean, then the other thing that's really sad and tragic in these things is that these people are young. You're talking about 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds. These people are confused. There's a lot of things going on in their heads. And here there is people, and even a system that's undermining their very being. So how do you then, as a school that says that, no, we're supposed to build up young students such that they can be functional members of society, but yet at the same time, at the very deep core, you're damaging them and you're undermining them. I think that for me is like the greatest tragedy, because we see it, and it's not sort of an isolated incident, because if you speak to people that have graduated from these schools, they'll tell you that these things have been going on ever since.
Yeah. We were told if your hair goes into your shoulders, you need to tie it back. As you were saying, my hair, so it's impossible for it to touch on my shoulders. But I want us to address this issue of the principal that was refused solely because of the fact that he or she is black in a predominantly colored school. Lebohang, what do you make of that?
I think racism is racism. I need to understand whether the point of contention is his race or whether the point of contention is that he's not Afrikaans speaking. What we were hearing was that they want an Afrikaans speak. If I speak good Afrikaans, if I brat just as well as the next person, then I'm qualified, am I or am I not? And I think that this kind of self-imposed segregation is very problematic. But then it also goes back to the fact that a lot of us don't have a broad African identity. And we're still grappling with what it means to be a South African today in 2017. So if a particular community feel that they want to hold on to a particular form of identity which overrides a South African identity, I think it's very regrettable, and I think it needs to be called out accordingly.
All right, Media Monitor returns shortly after this. ANC MP Dr. Makosi Khoza was formally charged with 2 counts of ill discipline by the ANC KwaZulu-Natal structure this past week. Well, this after Khoza's continued criticism of the party and her calls for President Jacob Zuma to publicly step down. The MP was charged for the remarks she made on her Facebook accounts on the 7th of July, as well as the remarks she made on July the 18th at the Conference for the Future of South Africa here in Johannesburg that was organized by Save South Africa. Khoza has also openly stated she would be voting with her conscience in the upcoming motion of no confidence debate come August the 8th. And since her string of criticism of the party, she has faced death threats and has been shunned by senior members of the ANC, with Police Minister Fikile Mbalula labeling her as a suicide bomber. Khoza will appear before the party's disciplinary hearing on the 10th of September in Durban. Let's find out more on this clip.
President, you are haunting the South African nation. Please, Mr. President, step down and respect those...
These are among the comments which landed Dr. Khoza in hot water. She spoke out against her party and later called for the president's head. Now the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal is taking action against her. The ANC accuses Dr. Khoza of bringing the party into disgrace.
She has contravened the constitution of the ANC, the policies of the ANC. So indeed, she'll have to appear before the disciplinary committee to answer those allegations.
She's not the first ANC member to criticize her own party outside its structures. Others have done so but haven't been charged. Former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan being one of them. The party spokesperson Zizigota says she has violated her oath of membership.
When you join the African National Congress, you sign an oath of membership. You commit yourselves to the principles, the values, the discipline of the organization that you uphold, you respect its discipline and decisions. She has violated that basic value of being a member of the ANC, an oath of membership.
These utterances have led to her receiving death threats. Parliament and the police minister eventually granted her protection. But Khoza says she will first have to consult with security experts before accepting the offer of security from government.
How can I be accepting voluntarily without applying my mind and consulting with experts when people are classifying me with the enemy, so to speak?
Khoza's charge comes 2 weeks before Parliament will vote on a motion of no confidence against the president. Ntlandla Khatlani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Lebohang, let's start with you. What do you make of these whole developments surrounding Dr. Makhosi Khoza, from the utterances to the charge now?
So I think in the context of the level of political violences that have been occurring over the last few years, these shouldn't be taken lightly, right? So, I mean, I think the Moerane Commission tells us that there have been about 89 political killings, none of which have been have
and most
yielded.
Of them in KZN.
And about over 400 in the last 23 years. Only 10% of them have yielded any kind of prosecution rate. So I mean, she's probably not mistaken in her sense of fear and her sense of distrust of party political organs. The second thing is that, with all due respect to Zizi Godwa, I think when a person joins a party, they don't sign up to become a sheep. They sign up to become people who are going to represent and without fear and favor. Aren't we always told this?
Yeah.
And also do so to represent the best interests of their constituents, of the broader population, and of governance principles. And I'm finding it really difficult to see where the disrepute lies in relation to her conduct. And I think that, in fact, what she is responding to the level of disrepute which this current administration, with its financial lack of probity, has taken this country, our reputation globally.
Well, they're saying she can say that, but along party structures, Lebohang. That's the ANC's argument.
Has she not been saying so in Parliament? Has she not been using these structures? And
have others not also uttered the same utterances?
And I think I find the whole idea that dissent and different forms of dissent must be shut down to the extent that A, there are death threats, and B, the threat of expulsion. I find it a very harsh penalty for what seemed to be what should be a conversation between comrades.
I mean, isn't this why there's a contestation, or rather a run for the secret ballot to be held in Parliament? I just want Melo to speak on this because we're almost out of time. I mean, Fikile Mbalula, Minister of Police, calling her a suicide bomber, and he's the one that's supposed to be giving police protection to her. What then?
Yeah, well, not to defend Fikile, but then he's a very colorful person and he has very colorful metaphors for things. But I think the thing that Fikile, perhaps, what I understood him to be saying is that there's a party line, and then if you're a member of an organization, you should somehow conform within that party line. And so my entry point into this question is that it's actually very difficult. If we take the example of the abortion case, right, where we legalized abortion in the country, there's a lot of people whose personal convictions and consciences tell them that abortion is wrong.
Yeah.
But the ANC, they deliberate this issue and they come out to the conclusion that for the broader good of society, what needs to happen is that we need to legalize abortion. So you're an ANC member now, but your conscience is telling you that no, abortion is wrong. So now when the ANC says that you must vote according to the party line, what do you do then? Because for some people, then it becomes easy in that sense now because you want women's rights, all of these things to say whatever, no, we must vote for abortion. But then for that person, this thing is a deeply held conviction. So for me, I think once you join a political party, these are the type of compromises that you have to make as an individual and understand that that's the type of thing that you're doing. I think the other issue also that's been raised here is about amending the constitution such that it allows MPs to vote with their consciences and so on. I think that is absolute nonsense because the thing that needs to happen here is that people need to have the courage of their conviction. You voted into that political structure or as part of an MP in parliament to be able to carry out a mandate. If you feel that you can no longer carry out that mandate, then rebel and do whatever you want. But then the thing that happens is that you can't want constitutional protection from consequences of your decisions. You must have the courage of your convictions to be able to follow through and make that decision and accept the consequences.
That's what Professor Friedman actually says. What do you think, Lebohang? Just to wrap this up.
I slightly disagree. I think that I still think that MPs are not voting fodder, are not sheep. And I think that certainly several constitutions across the world allow for instances such as this, where along, questions such as, abortion or sex work or whatever, MPs have been given, public representatives are given the opportunity to vote with their own conscience. But I do think that it's a bit harsh to say that if you disagree on this, we completely dismiss and remove you from our structures. I think it's very problematic and very Stalinist politics.
Ms. Lebohang Pheko, Mr. Meloma Kgoleho, both joining me to analyze some of the biggest news of this week. Thank you so much for joining us here on Media Monitor. We are back with a fresh round of news that are going to be making headlines in this coming week. But I'm back just now on top of the hour with AM News. Do stay tuned.
All right, we talk about a healthy lifestyle, but what is this healthy lifestyle?
What we're talking about really is you are healthy in those three areas of life: body, mind, and soul.
Before you embark on a weight loss journey, rather first speak to your person who has your complete clinical picture.
Ideally, your plate should look like this. Half of your plate should be fruit and vegetables. A quarter of your plate, starch. Quarter protein.
Tell you some of the things that I really enjoy doing for that bottom pouch as well as for cardio. So you do your kicks, you kick back.
Join Health Talk every Saturday for all your health news.
What guides us? What